makes a good teacher. And they would say to me, a recurrent question, you're okay, but you wave your hands around a lot. So when I saw that roving mic, I said, I won't be able to handle that because it will end up all over the place. I'm great. Okay, so, picking up from what the principal has been talking about, the two big ideas I took out of there was, young people, specifically at 15, 16, are growing up. And the world is changing. There are two big ideas, and transition year fits into that picture very clearly. So you can go to the first one. Okay. So, I want the adults, the parents in particular, to think back to when you were 15. So you're no longer a child. And when we're 15, we think we know everything, and we want to be adults. We want to be adults quickly. And we want to get out of school fast. And in a way, that almost tells us, well, the maturity question. Maybe we're not so mature at 15. But it's difficult for adults to tell us things when we're 15. And transition year is that wonderful space that now in Ireland and other countries are looking at us and saying, what an interesting thing you're doing. You're saying to adolescents, halfway through the teenage years, here's a chance to concentrate on growing up, on becoming more mature. Now, we can unpack then, what do we mean by more mature? And one of the clear things is what you made about confidence. Have you the confidence to enter the edges of that adult world? Have you the confidence to be able to talk for yourself, to stand on your own feet? And transition year is hugely about developing that confidence so that at the end of it, people are more able to engage with the world around them. The impact transition year has had on the students. They nearly always say, oh, they're so much confident. They've got that confidence. They've had that growing.
I have two very shy girls over here, and I'm just going to ask them to say a little word. I won't ask you to stand up. They have come over from our sister school in Golden Bridge, Mercy Golden Bridge, where the transition year has been running for a good while. So will you just introduce yourself and say a few little words about how transition year was for you?
I'm Ailish and I'm Ailish and I did transition year last year, and it was great because we got a lot of experience in different things like work experience and we all matured and we gained a lot of confidence, and now we're a lot more comfortable around each other, and it was just great. It was really fun instead of having to go straight into 5th year and into studying and all again.
So do you feel more ready now for 5th year?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So what advice would you give the students?
I think you should do it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming over. Both these girls said that you said you wouldn't like to have been going straight from 3rd year into 5th year. No.
For people who weren't here last year at the open day, we did a big, massive bit around our school business partnership. And our business partnership is with Communicore, which means that they come into the school and they link with our students from 5th year. And in relation to that, it's about our students getting a chance to develop their skills. Like you mentioned earlier about the likes of work experience, this is another element. The students are getting in to meet mentors who will give them advice to do with anything that they're worried about in relation to their own lives. They'll help them to develop their skills and everything like that, and they have social events. So it's about looking out past our local community and building it with the wider community. So it's a fantastic opportunity, and as I say, what's brilliant about it is they're only linked to our school, which is absolutely the bee's knees. Like Air School was mentioned this morning on radio by Ian Dempsey. So you can't get any better than that. So now I'm going to call on David and Adrian, and they're going to talk a little bit about themselves. Then they're going to give a little bit of advice about what skills that they would look for in young people going for jobs, and basically talk about a little bit about their own experience of transition year as well, because it's been around a long time. Adrian thought it was only a few years, but it's actually 40 years. So I'm just going to hand over to the two lads first of all.
Yeah, my name's Dave. I work for News Talk. I'm a sports commentator with News Talk. I did transition year, feel very old to actually try and do the maths, but I think it was 1996, and I would have been lost without it, to be honest. I wasn't mature enough to go into fifth year at the time. You really want to take an opportunity to keep yourself out of fifth year for as long as you possibly can. We learned a huge amount in it, going straight from the hype that surrounded the junior cert, which is probably a little overhyped, but you do get into the guise of it's all about study, it's all about exams, and it is, as Dr. Jerry said, it is a space for you to just assess where you are, assess your maturity levels, assess your confidence levels, and try things that you never got a chance to try before. There were 2 subjects that I ended up doing for my leaving cert that weren't on the curriculum until you got to 4th year, and I had never tried them before. One of them was classical studies, which is ancient Rome, ancient Greece, and I said I would sample it in transition year, and I was 2 or 3 months into it, got to December, and I'd already decided that that was going to form part of my leaving cert. The work experience part was incredibly useful. Obviously the doctor spoke about the possibility of finding something that you really believe in and that you would like to do when you leave school. It could also be an opportunity to find out what you don't want to do. I went into advertising for 2 weeks and I hated it, and I knew that that's one thing off the list that I will never have to do when I leave school. So you may actually learn the negative side of the work experience thing, and that can be incredibly useful as well when you're moving into 6th year and into your college years as well. We did community service as well. I worked for 2 weeks with disabled children, which was just an environment I'd never been in before. It was a real eye-opener. And you also develop the relationship with your friends and your teachers that you never would have done before. The slide that Jerry had up about the difference in the vibe in the room when the teachers are there. You get to know the teachers outside of them telling you where you need to be, where you have to do your homework, where you need to be in terms of this stage of the year and how much study you should have done. It changes everything from when you go into 5th year. And it just arms you in a very different way for what the challenges will be in 5th and 6th year. If you're going to 5th year as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, if you're doing your leaving cert as a 17-year-old, it can be very difficult. And I'm only speaking from my own personal experience, but I know that I would not have been ready, and I would not have been able to do the leaving cert I did if I'd gone straight from 3rd year to 5th year. It's effectively 3 long, difficult years of study if you do not have a 4th year to break it up and learn about yourself and learn about your teachers, learn about your friends, and learn about what you might like to do when you leave school. I would absolutely encourage everybody to embrace transition year because it's one of the best things that I ever did.
My name is Adrian Barry. I was the one that was hanging with Rory McIlroy there. He's not normally around the office, but on occasion, all right. I produce Off the Ball at the weekend and do some presenting as well. Unlike Dr. Jerry here, I'm not an expert in transition year by any stretch of the imagination, but have experienced, and thanks to Nuala, when I came out here today, I was under the impression that I was in one of the first years of it, but not quite that old. It has been around for 40 years. Look, a lot of things that they've mentioned, that in terms of that experience of it, the idea of a growth in confidence. I spent a couple of weeks working in a tourist office. One of the big things about transition year was, I think at this time of your life, a lot of people are beginning to ask the question of what it is you want to do with your life. And these are questions that generally you don't really have an answer for, I don't think, at this time. Transition year was brilliant for me to figure out some of the things I did want to do, and probably, as importantly, many things that I definitely didn't want to do, which turns out tourist office is one of those. But I couldn't recommend transition year enough, I have to say. It definitely helped me along the path to figuring out what it is I want to do with my life, and so much as I have up to this point, and I couldn't recommend it enough.
I suppose in relation to yourselves being mentors last year, What did you find worked brilliantly with the students here? Like, what was so positive about the experience for both of you?
Before I started doing the mentoring program, it was said to us that you'll get as much from this, and that's the general experience that people will say afterwards, that the mentors are getting as much from the program as the students are. And it seemed like a bit of a cliche, but as I stand here today at the end of having done it with a student over the last 18 months, I can certainly confirm that. And the growth in that student as well over that time. He was, I think fair enough to say, a pretty shy guy at that point in his life when we started to meet, and just to see the confidence that grew in him, the ability that he had at various points to start maybe to reveal a little bit more about himself and his interests, academically and outside of that as well. It was a really positive experience, I have to say, for me, and I definitely think that the student as well would have gotten a lot out of it.
Yeah, I found it very positive as well. I think it's just an opportunity, and maybe this isn't something that's stressed enough for the students that get involved in it, to speak to somebody that isn't going to judge them. It's not their parents, it's not the principal, it's not a teacher, it's not somebody that's going to make a judgment or a decision on what they're doing and look upon them negatively. It's basically somebody completely unattached to your own life, and you know you can ask them a question and we will give you our honest answers. We've all walked in the shoes of you guys, we've all done transition.
Just questions about skills and what sort of skills we would look for in students and kids when they come in to do either work experience or indeed further down the track, I guess, when they're actually looking for employment. And I suppose probably one of the big things that we would look for would be outside of the sort of basis that you would get from the world of academia, quite clearly going into the media. Dave has mentioned that he did, was it ancient Rome and ancient Greece. I couldn't claim to have gone down that particular track myself, but certainly you look for some sort of an element of a background from the academic point of view. But one of the big things for me is a passion for the job, and I think it's when you work in sport, it's kind of easy to engender that, but everybody will have their own individual thing that they're passionate about. And so the thing that I look for when somebody is coming to either come in and work experience or looking for a job in the longer term is how passionate they are. And I think it can lead to a lot of different roads if that's the fundamental building block in what it is you want to do with your life.
I'd echo everything Adrian said there, but a couple of other things would be your computer skills are vitally important. Aside from just the basic use of Word or Excel, people want to employ you if you are indispensable. So if you're the guy that can fix the printer, if you're the guy that can set up a PowerPoint presentation, if you're the guy that can help somebody else with Excel, they look to you, and when you're not there they realise that what you brought to the place was actually far more important than anybody gave you credit for. So if you can do something a little bit beyond, it might only be an hour a week working on your Word or your Excel or your PowerPoint or your database, it's well worth it. It'll stand to you not only in the first job you do, but the second job, the third job, all the way to your 40s and 50s, it will stand to you. And the word Adrian mentioned there was passion. A lot of us will go through jobs, and it isn't like the world was 30 or 40 years ago where you had a job for life. You left school, you went into the bank, you retired from the bank with a pension when you were 65. When you guys retire, you may well have done 10 different jobs over the course of those 45 years. You won't enjoy every job that you did, and you won't like every job you did, but you need to bring a passion to every job. I started in the bank. It's easy for me to work now in sport because I love sport, but I spent 5 years in a bank, and there were days where I absolutely detested just walking in the door in the morning. But when you get in, you have to show a little bit of a passion, and I think that sort of passion will just send you an awful long way.
Hi everyone. Thank you very much. I'm not going to speak too long. I need the microphone because my voice isn't as loud as everyone else. But first of all, thank you for the school for inviting me here. I'm from across the road. I'm from up at the Cooley Road roundabout there on Mourne Road, and that's where my dad still lives. And my family has a long association with this school. I went to Mourne Road up until my communion, and then I went to Drimnagh Castle after that because my two best friends were going to Drimnagh Castle and I was inseparable. I know I'm losing the crowd here, but all of my cousins came to Mourne Road and my sister came to Mourne Road, and they were all smarter than me. So, and my aunt actually works here as well. My aunt Trish works here, and she was at the back of the room, but I think she's gone away in case I embarrass the family. But I didn't do transition year. So as a result, I was 17 at the end of March, and in June I did my Leaving Certificate. So I was 17 and 3 months when I did my Leaving Cert. And then I was delighted, I was finished school, the joy of doing the Leaving Cert. I went and I had holidays, I got the Leaving Cert result, and there was one thing I was certain of, and that was I did not want to go to college that year. I was determined I wasn't going to college, so I didn't. And I took a year out before I went to college. And that year out was very important because I worked hard, I had jobs, and the world kicked me about, and I realised it was a big, bad world. And a year later, I was really, really glad to go to college. I was so glad to go to college. But I realise now that I took the hard road on that, and I went about and experiencing things in the world that I didn't need to do that way. I could have done that through transition year, and I really, really regret that I didn't do transition year. And there are a couple of reasons why I didn't. When I was in my junior cert year, Christmas before my junior cert, my sister and my mother passed away, and that was very, very tough. And coming back into school and facing into the junior cert was tough that year. But an absolute vital, my teachers were brilliant, but my classmates were brilliant. And my classmates who I had grown up with, including the two guys I'd gone from Mourne Road with, but also my new friends from Drimnagh, they were all one of the most essential things in my life at that time. And that school had a choice about doing transition year or not. And my best friends and my essential friends were not doing it. So I would have, and Jerry touched on this, answering some of your questions, and I thought hard about it, and I could have done with a year off, you know, the cycle of studying. But the reason I didn't, and I am glad for this reason too, was so not to be separated from my peers. And that's why Mourne Road has a choice now, and the parents have a choice, and I think the parents who are a little bit disquiet and maybe are a little bit worried about this really should put it up to the teachers and to the principal to say, okay, well show us why this one isn't going to be a transition year that is only 2 weeks work, or that is kind of leaves them behind. And I, to be critical of my old school back then, I think transition year was lacking. I think it's much more vibrant now. They've done things with it. And for that reason, I am glad I didn't do that transition year, but I do regret not doing a worthwhile transition year. So for that point, I think about that year where I went and I went out into the world, and I think about my dad and my sister and how important they were to drag me back and say, okay, you know, you've tried this, now why don't you try college? And it was in the first year of college that I went on to, it was media, it was communications, but that's where I found radio, and that has been my passion since, and journalism has been my passion since. So something grabbed me because of that. But that could have gone another way. I could have gone another way with that year. I could have just kept going. I could be very happy if I'd not gone to college. I don't know, you don't have to go to college, but I'm really glad that I found a way back. And so I kind of think of my experience as having done this reverse transition year, having not done it earlier, then done it myself, but that was the hard road. I did not need to take that road. So it's a big decision the school's making. All I can hear from the teachers and the principal is a passion. I can hear a passion for this. From the 15, 14-year-olds, my God, this is the worst thing ever, an extra year of school. I can see all of those arguments at home with your parents. But I would just really encourage the parents who are nervous about this, and I would say your reasoning is very, very good to be nervous, to just think about the difference between putting an 18-year-old out and a 17-year-old out. And when I went to college, incidentally, just one other thing that Jerry touched upon, I did consider myself a bit more mature, but you could definitely, in first year of college, detect without asking who had done transition year and who hadn't, whose transition year was in their school and who wasn't, because it was a completely different outlook on life. And other things become possible in college, like nights out, like you're old enough to drink when you're in college, things like that. And immaturity versus maturity with those decisions and those nights out were very often aligned with what age people had come into college with, which is, of course, transition year is dependent on. So I didn't do it. I regret not doing it. I think what Mourne Road is planning is going to be good. I know you have a decision to make whether it will be optional or everyone. That was my experience of why I didn't do it, because it was optional. And I just wish you all luck, but keep the dialogue going, because what you're doing here today is very, very healthy. Confront any of the concerns you have, and I wish you luck in the big decision for this September.